It was New Year's Eve, and the streets were alive with celebration. Fireworks lit up the distant sky, the occasional bursts of color visible even from the dark, winding country road I was driving on. I was heading to my best friend Kevin's party, which was being held at his family's lake house about 30 minutes outside of town. My car's radio buzzed with static, and I fiddled with the dial, frustrated at the lack of reception. That's when I saw her, a woman standing on the shoulder of the road. She was illuminated by my headlights, her white gown stark against the blackness of the forest behind her. She stood completely still, her head tilted slightly down as though she was staring at her bare feet. My foot instinctively hovered over the brake, but something about her made me hesitate. It wasn't just the oddity of her appearance. It was the way she stood, too rigid, almost unnatural. I slowed down just enough to get a better look. Her face was pale, her hair damp and hanging in messy strands. She didn't look up as I passed, and a chill ran down my spine. I kept driving, shaking off the unease. It's New Year's, I muttered to myself. Maybe she's just drunk or got lost. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't forget the way she looked, how utterly out of place she seemed on that desolate road. When I arrived at Kevin's party, I tried to push the image from my mind. The house was buzzing with laughter and music, and soon I found myself caught up in the celebration. The hours flew by, and before I knew it, it was past 2 a.m. Most of the guests had either gone home or passed out on couches and in spare bedrooms. I decided to head back, not wanting to risk staying too late and driving tired. The drive home felt heavier, the celebrations felt far away, the night quieter, almost oppressively so. I couldn't shake the thought of the woman in white. Was she still out there? About 10 minutes into the drive, my car jolted. I felt the unmistakable thud of a flat tire. Cursing under my breath, I pulled over to the side of the road. Grabbing my flashlight, I stepped out to inspect the damage. Both of my rear tires were slashed, the cuts clean and deliberate. My heart sank. This wasn't a random blowout. Someone had done this. My stomach churned as I scanned the woods, the flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. That's when I saw her again. She was standing at the tree line, barely visible in the faint glow of my flashlight. This time her head was tilted up, and she was staring directly at me. My body froze, every instinct screaming for me to get back in the car. Her face was blank, devoid of emotion, but there was something deeply unsettling about her eyes. They seemed too wide, too dark. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to mask the fear in my voice. She didn't respond, didn't even flinch. Instead, she took a step forward and then another, her movements slow but deliberate. I dropped the flashlight in my panic, scrambling back into the car and locking the doors. My hands fumbled with my phone as I tried to call Kevin, but the screen flickered and went dark, the battery inexplicably dead. She was closer now, standing just a few feet from the driver's side window. I could see her breath fogging up the glass, her face just inches away from mine. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. My trembling hand found the keys and I turned the ignition. The engine sputtered, refusing to start. Tears blurred my vision as I tried again and again, silently begging the car to come to life. On the fourth attempt, the engine roared to life. I slammed my foot on the gas, the car lurching forward. She didn't move, didn't even flinch as I sped away. My heart pounded in my chest as I drove blindly, not caring about the direction, just needing to get away. After what felt like an eternity, I saw the familiar outline of Kevin's house and pulled into the driveway. Stumbling out of the car, Kevin opened the door, confused but concerned, as I babbled incoherently about what had happened. "She followed me," I kept saying, clutching at his arm. He led me inside, locking the doors and assuring me I was safe. But just as I started to calm down, Kevin froze. He was staring at something on the front porch. Slowly, I turned to see what it was. There, lying on the welcome mat, was a rusty knife. Its blade was stained, the handle cracked and weathered. Kevin's face was pale as he bent down to pick it up. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. I didn't have an answer. All I could think about was the woman in white. Had she left it there? How had she followed me so quickly? The next day, we called the police, but they found no evidence, no footprints, no trace of anyone ever being at the house. The woman was never found, and the questions surrounding that night remain unanswered. Even now, every New Year's Eve, I think about her, standing on the side of the road, her wide eyes staring into mine. I don't drive at night anymore. Some things are better left unseen. It was close to midnight when my plane finally landed. Exhausted from a long business trip, I was relieved to be home, but dreading the late-night ride to my apartment. I booked a taxi at the airport, opting for the convenience of a quick pickup. Instead of waiting for rideshare availability, the car pulled up, and the driver, a middle-aged man with a friendly smile, stepped out to help with my luggage. "Late flight, huh?" he said, his tone casual as he opened the trunk. I nodded, sliding into the back seat while he loaded my bags. The car smelled faintly of cigarette smoke, and the dashboard was cluttered with loose papers and an air freshener, shaped like a pine tree. "Long day?" he asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. His tone was polite, but there was something about the way he held my gaze a second too long that made me uneasy. I chalked it up to my exhaustion and leaned. Back in my seat, the ride started off normally enough. He asked a few basic questions, where I was coming from, what I did for work, and I answered out of politeness. But as we merged onto the highway, his questions became more personal. "Do you live alone?" he asked, his voice casual, but his eyes watchful. No," I lied. "My boyfriend's waiting for me." His smile faltered slightly, and he looked back at the road. My unease grew with every passing minute. He kept glancing at me in the mirror, his questions becoming more probing. "What part of town do you live in? Are you close to family?" I answered vaguely, my hand tightening around my phone. I considered texting someone but didn't want to seem paranoid. Then he missed my exit. "I think you passed the turn," I said, my voice strained. "Oh, don't worry," he replied, waving it off. "I know a shortcut." My heart sank. The highway stretched on, the lights of the city growing distant as we veered onto a darker, less familiar road. "No, this isn't right," I said louder this time. "I need you to take me back to the main road." His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Relax," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We'll get there." My instincts were screaming now. I quickly texted a friend my location, typing as discreetly as I could. The driver noticed. "You don't trust me, do you?" he asked, his tone a mix of amusement and irritation. "You shouldn't be so paranoid." My stomach churned as he turned onto a deserted street, the houses few and far between. I could see a police car parked ahead, its lights off. Without thinking, I grabbed my bag and yanked open the door, jumping out before the car had fully stopped. "What the hell are you doing?" the driver shouted as I ran toward the police car, waving frantically. The officer stepped out, startled as I blurted out what had happened. By the time he approached the taxi, the driver had sped off, leaving me shaking on the side of the road. The officer gave me a ride home, his presence reassuring but unable to erase the fear still coursing through me. I reported the incident to the taxi company, but they claimed the driver wasn't one of theirs. That's when the strange things started happening. The next night, there was a knock at my door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. Over the next week, I noticed more signs that someone had been near my apartment. The bushes outside my window were trampled, and once I found a cigarette butt on the windowsill. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of someone jiggling my door handle. My heart raced as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The noise stopped, but when the police arrived, they found no one. I couldn't prove it was the driver, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. I moved out of that apartment within a month, installing extra locks and cameras in my new place. Even now, I double-check every ride I take, scrutinizing the driver and the car. That night taught me to always trust my instincts, because not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions.